Why don't you go over there? Why don't you sit right there? That's like your favorite spot. It's about to be bad. Oh, is this recording? Whoops. I'm looking for my starting soon screen. Got it. Okay. So I forgot this was recording. Hello, everybody. So this is just like my little beginning intro thing that I do kind of by myself because I forget sometimes that this starts recording. I want this warmer. Ew, no, I don't. Okay. Yeah, this is the March discussion. It's now April 2nd, but we were discussing the March book so we could give everybody the full month to read it. The Great Mortality by John Kelly. I did finish it. I have some thoughts, but I'm very excited to see what everybody else thinks of it. So this is our discussion. This is about the Black Death, specifically an intimate history of the Black Death, the most devastating plague of all time. This is a very lengthy, dry book, but I enjoyed parts of it. I disliked other parts of it. I'm very curious to see what everybody else says, though. And yeah, let's begin the discussion. Let me get this pause and talk to you guys in a bit. So people who have missed the discussion can go back and watch it, which is very exciting. I love seeing people comment afterwards if they are unable to make it. Let's see. If you hear screaming cats, they're fine. They just want in the room. I don't let them in because they'll start climbing stuff and I want to be able to focus. Just ignore them. They'll be okay. Basic book club rules. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. Preferably, if everybody could just stay on mute because we have a good amount of people here. If you do need to say something, there is a reaction emoji at the bottom here. If you just want to raise your hand or give a thumbs up while people are talking, the clapping emoji, if you like agree, if you can do that instead, we'll just be all talking over each other and it would be chaos. Even if you haven't finished the book, you're still welcome to hang out, vice versa, whatever works. Like if you just want to be here with people, that's totally cool. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Afterwards, because a lot of the time the Morbidly Curious Book Club does read some morbid books. So afterwards, if you guys would like to hang out for another 30 minutes, sometimes it lasts a little bit longer for just like a palate cleanser where we talk about just stuff that we're into, stuff that we've been watching, stuff that we've been reading. If you would like to stay, you can, but other than that, come and go as you would like. You don't have to stick around for the whole however long this takes for us to discuss this book. Completely up to you. Let's see. Let's try, unlike the author, let's try and stay a little bit on track here. I'm already throwing just a little bit of shade. Let's try and keep it, condensed. And if you find yourself, it's kind of hard to say, but try and keep it, since we have a couple people here or a good amount of people here, let's try and keep our opinions just, a couple minutes, just, you don't have to go on for like 20 minutes. It's okay. Let's see. Stay on track. Differing opinions, please be kind. We haven't had an issue with that, but I have to say it every time. Admit one more person. Let's see. Yeah, there's ways to find us, and I can show you guys that actually after the call. I'll share my screen and we'll do that. Anyway. Welcome, everybody. This is for TikTok, we are discussing The Great Mortality by John Kelly. This is an intimate history of the Black Death, the most devastating plague of all time. And round of applause for me. I finished the book. It's been like 4 months. Thank you. Clap, clap, clap. It's been 4 months since I have finished a dang book for my own book club. But here we are. I did it. I know, right? Isn't it beautiful? Y'all, I was drawing in here. I think I drew a little rat at one point. Where's my little... I think I sent that to Joanne's comment somewhere. Oh, damn. All these tabs. Oh, there he is. Look at him. I had such a fun time, which is so morbid to say. I had such a fun time just annotating the absolute dog shit out of this book. It was just, for something about it, I was having a good time, which again, it's sad. Many people died, but here we are. And also Christopher, my dear boyfriend, bought me this shirt with a plague doctor on it. So I found it very fitting to wear tonight. He got it on Amazon. It says sell the cure. I don't know what that means, but I figured it was fitting for the book club. So we're wearing it. Anyway, I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you. Yeah, Amazon. It's from Amazon. It's probably like a stolen design or something. Don't tell anybody. So yeah, I would love to hear what you guys thought. This is actually if I'm correct on this, so if you go back to our book club's site, let me share my screen here and show you what I'm looking at. Currently reading, is that, no, that's not what it is. I think it's under the meetings tab. So when you go to our meetings tab, you could actually scroll all the way down and see the club average rating. I think sometimes it pokes you guys like, hey, don't forget to rate the books you just read. Of course, we've had mostly 7s, 8s, maybe a 6 here and there. This is the lowest rated book we have had yet in the book club, with a 5.7, which is so fascinating to me. I'm so excited to hear your opinion. Let's start off, I guess, with the people who really, really, really didn't like this book. I would love to hear your opinion. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings, I promise. We've had some flops before. It's okay. It's bound to happen. I know there's going to be a spectrum with this one. There's going to be people that loved it and there's going to be people that hated it. So let's start with the people who just really didn't like it. Abby has her hand raised. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm good with the volume.
Hello.
Hi. There we go.
Hi. So I wouldn't say I hated it. I think I said in my review, I think I gave it a 4.
Okay.
I said that, so I was about halfway through, I started kind of skimming as opposed to like really reading it. I think my biggest gripe was the way that the guy writes is a little bit unapproachable for like casual readers. Like if you are just trying to get a general idea of like what the plague is like, it's nice to have for it to be written in a way that's like approachable for people with a whole across the spectrum of vocabularies. And this man, it was like an SAT prep book, the way that he was writing. Some of the words I was like, I know it's been a while since I've been in school, but I don't know what the hell he's saying. But I did like the information that we got, and I did like the fact that he was using contemporary stuff. It was just like, I feel like he needed to be like 100 pages shorter or something. Although I did read somebody else's review that said that they read it as if it was like a psychotic backpacker, like going into towns, destroying everything and then leaving. That's like how they were like kind of contextualizing it. And that was like, oh, if I had come in with that mindset and like kind of thought about it that way, I think I maybe would have been able to like get engrossed a little bit more. But it was a little bit dry for me. But I did, I appreciate the hard work that obviously went into it.
Right. Yeah. He spent a lot of time doing his history on this. You could definitely tell that, yes, one of the more drier books that I've read. And I think along with what you're saying too, there was a book club member, a friend of mine, Ashley. I don't think she's here. She was saying, see, the air just went off and I feel like I'm yelling. She was describing the plague, or I believe it's Pestius, however you say it, as like a villain. And like the way he was like writing it was really fascinating, because it was like, and then the Pestilence made a unannounced arrival in this town.
Yeah.
It's like his wording was really fascinating, but the pacing of this book was excruciating.
Yeah, like I know he was like trying to trace it, from Eurasia to like it was, I liked the way that it was almost personified, but again, it was just like I felt the same way reading this as I did when I was trying to read J.R.R. Tolkien. I was like, let's get this shit going. Like, we can move on a little bit. I did bookmark one page because I did like one of the lines, which was, I think it was chapter 12, when they were talking about how kind of similar to World War II, this kind of helped women become more economically relevant. And I think that the line was, why Pestis turns out to have been something of a feminist. And I liked that quote. I thought that was a good line. But like I said, really interesting information. I loved the drama of it all, like the Queen Joanna and the corrupt popes and the self-flagellators, and like those were all really cool. But I was just like, every time I got to a town, I was like, yep, everybody's gonna die. I know, let's go. So
yeah, like the little pieces of history at the beginning of each chapter were like great. Like sometimes he would go into like, where I think he was talking about London. It was just like a page and a half of like the stance of the economy, who was fighting who hated who was having sex with who. And then it's like, okay, then we get into the plague. It was like this nice flow. But then sometimes I was like, why am I reading about a murder trial right now? Like, what is happening?
Yeah. So yeah, so that was my opinion, but yeah.
4 stars is good. 4 stars is, yeah, that's a solid rating. Joanna, hello. And I think I saw Hank. Was that Hank or was that another cat?
That was Hank.
Hank.
I love plague books. And there were a lot of things about this I loved. I was especially floored by the chapter about the Jewish pogroms. I had no idea that Jews had been attacked for literally thousands of years. I thought that was just awful. But I read on a Kindle, so I took screenshots. The way he phrased things, I just wanted to shake him. Okay, something or other was the first theological Super Bowl. Then he talks about the greedy Arabs. Then he says, each armed with the equivalent of a large thermonuclear device. And he kept talking about the thermonuclear thing throughout. He kept comparing it to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. Then he said, slitting each other's throats with the happy abandon of mafia clans. The pathogenic equivalent of a piranha. Why Pestis has been forced to go nuclear. Pope Clement V and his successors transformed the church into a spiritual Pez dispenser. And he's talking some sort of pernicious threat, medieval Spice Girls everywhere. Then on page 176 or so, he says, but the disease that Camus described was already old and enfeebled. So here he's comparing the plague in the early 1900s to the plague in the 1300s. And he's saying the plague was old and enfeebled, drained of its virulent poisons by centuries of battles, blah, blah, blah. But that's not how a virus works. It's not going to get enfeebled over time. It's going to mutate and become more dangerous. So anyway, those are all my little quotes, and he just pissed me off.
So you didn't like the book at all. 1 star, just throw it away. I love it. Yeah.
No, I liked it. I actually would give it a 4 stars out of 5 because, I mean, that research was amazing.
Yes.
I learned a lot. I loved the personal details, but a lot of the times when he was writing the personal details, there was a lot of fiction thrown in, like where, I mean, he probably read some church record that said so-and-so's wife died, so-and-so married 2 weeks later, and then he conflates it into this whole, he was having an affair, and then I'm making that part up, but I mean, he's putting words and situations into people and places that we don't know happen.
Right. Yeah, I actually renamed the book while I was going through this because I feel like this was the most repetitive thing ever. I called it An Intimate History of the Black Death, the Most Devastating Plague of All Time, also known as We Think We Know Where It Started and How Many People Died, but it's unclear, and we blamed literally everyone but ourselves. I feel like it's pretty fitting because I feel like every time we were this close to like getting some, I mean, of course, this is forever ago. I understand that not a lot of people kept the records like they were supposed to and they weren't expecting this to happen. But it's just like every time we were getting like so close to just like some percentage or statistic, it was like, but it's unclear. It's unclear. It's unclear. And I was after a while like, okay, all right, I get it. I get it. Okay, so that's another 4 star. I'd love to hear it. Let's see, Alex. Is their hand raised? Their hand raised. Hello.
So I gave it 4 stars too. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I started reading the physical book and then I switched over to the audiobook because it was just crazy busy month. And I found the narrator's voice like super soothing. So like I enjoyed the audiobook. I like as time is passing, I'm kind of honestly forgetting everything that what happened in the book. But the one thing I took away, like kind of piggybacking off of Joanna, how the Jews were targeted, like the genocide. Being a history major, I loved like reading, like listening about that. Because I didn't know that the Jews were targeted like that many years into the past. And, you know, us history majors love to say history is doomed to repeat itself. And so I found that interesting. I think the author even said like that history doesn't repeat itself. I think I remember hearing that in the audiobook, which I completely disagree with. So yeah, that was super fascinating, especially because I concentrated on the Holocaust. I took a lot of Holocaust courses in college. So I did think that that was interesting. So I gave it 4 stars because I did learn a lot. Some parts I would kind of like tune out, and then something would like grab my attention again, and then kind of like, you know, almost like I was like listening to music in the background, whatever I was doing. So
Right.
I didn't hate it, didn't love it, but I learned a lot. Like, you know, I thought it was a decent read.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I definitely agree. I think I think bits and parts of it I really, really enjoyed. Some of it, I can't remember who said it in the beginning. I think it was Abby. It could have probably been trimmed down a good amount. And also I love Annabelle's comment in our chat. She said, off topic, but love the wallpaper. I feel like Alex, every time you get on camera.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody's
Sorry,
like,
I'm
"Oh
not
my
even
God."
looking at the chat. I know I told you guys I would tell you where it was from. It's from US Wall Decor.
Writing that down. Hang on, give me a second. US Wall Decor.
Yes, and I think it's Rifle and Paper Company, like peel and stick wallpaper.
Oh, I love that.
Give
Okay.
you guys a close up. I don't know if you can see.
I love it.
Can you see it?
Your room is so dark this time. I love it.
Sorry, I painted my room black because I wanted it super dark and moody. Like you can see the black, and then
I love it.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
white in here, and I kind of hate it sometimes. Rifle paper, really love it. I love it. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's a tale as old as time with just anti-Semitism, but I never knew it was happening during the Black Death. I never knew that, and I never knew how bad it was. I mean, some of the stuff that they were doing to people, I had to skip pages. I was like, I don't, you know, I should be, I'm learning, I should be reading this, and you know, but I was like, it just infuriates me more than anything else on the planet. It drives me absolutely bananas.
Yeah, when I say like, you know, I didn't know this happened. People are like, you majored in history. How do you not know? I'm like, do you know how big history is? Like, it's impossible to know everything.
Yeah, casting a wide net here. Cool. So anybody else wanted to share their thoughts on kind of their dislikes about it, or if they just really didn't like the book at all? Again, we don't have to speak if you don't want to. I'm gonna share if you loved it. Who gave it 6 out of 5. Absolutely obsessed with it. Rafe. And I'm so excited.
Patches.
I'm so excited that Stacy's here. Hello, dear.
Hello.
Welcome. Oh, I'm so excited.
One of us.
One of us. Welcome to the weird corners of the internet.
They're out there.
And her spouse is part of it.
Anytime I get like a member of the book club join, I'm like, wow, another weirdo. Let's go. Love it. Cool. So excited to hear what you have to say. Lay it on us. Tell us everything.
So I thought it was interesting. I love a good plague book. I have to admit, I read quite a few. So I didn't find it super dry or technical, but I'm a nurse. I have a medical background. I don't think that stuff is, I don't know. I didn't think he went that technical. I thought he kept it kind of light, but I probably have a different perspective that I'm coming from. I started with the audiobook and then moved to the paper. The structure was hard to follow in the audiobook starting that way. Like I didn't get that's how the book was structured, that we were going from city to city. I kept waiting for all the history points to like connect. And you know, when you're audiobook, it's usually because I'm driving or I'm commuting or I'm doing whatever. So I got a little confused in the beginning. I was like, what is happening? But then when I kind of got the structure, I was like, oh, this is a really good way to personalize it without it getting too technical. We can hear a little bit of the history, what was going on, the climate, the culture. I thought that was interesting. Some of the stories I was like, do you really know that. But that's fine. My audiobook got returned. The library took it away from me. So I didn't finish all the way, but I go to pick up the paper book and I'm like, I don't know, the print's too small, the margins aren't wide enough. So it wasn't compelling enough for me to finish it yet. I plan to finish it, but I got as far as like the Jewish piece. And I remember at one point I went, and this is why when we talk about things being medieval, and because the different tortures were, those were intense.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't rated it yet because I haven't finished it. I like to finish it before I actually give anything a rating.
Totally get it.
Did you have any other?
Rafe.
I found it too technical because I just make pretty moving pictures for a living, and I was like, wow, what I love history. I love it, and it was just a lot for me. It was I mean, there were some bright spots, but are there bright spots?
There were not bright spots.
Okay,
I know what
never
you
mind.
mean.
Back
I do
that.
know what you
Reverse that. I don't know.
Easier parts to read.
Easier parts to read. Thank you. There were easier parts to read, but it was, yeah, it kind of, I think like others said, it kind of droned on for me quite a bit. It's like, oh, okay, we're doing this. Look, we're doing this again. Okay, we're doing this again. And I did the opposite. I started with the paper book and then tried to find the audiobook this weekend to finish it, and I couldn't. They were all out. So.
And it wasn't worth our Audible credit. I'll
No.
give it that.
No, I get it. It is on Scribd, and I really should get rid of Scribd because I don't use it as much as I should, but it is on Scribd. But I prefer just reading it than listening to the audiobook actually. And I did like the audiobook narrator, kind of like Alex was saying, but yeah, I don't know. I needed to read it. I will say it drove me bananas that some parts of the book, the font just gets huge. And then the next page, it's fine. It's like, I know I'm not supposed to get mad about this. This isn't going to alter my rating, but it's driving me bananas. I don't like it.
Wall of words. It's kind of intimidating. So
yeah. Oh, here's my burning church drawing. I don't know if anybody's curious about it. I was having such a ball with this. But yeah, so this page, yeah, here's the normal, and then it just gets huge, and it was driving me a little bananas. I am curious if you had any recommendations on plague books that you have loved while I have you.
I'm going to put it in the comments because I can think of the one that I want, but I can't think of the title.
Whenever.
And I loved it, but I will get you one.
Yes, please. Sweet. Thank you again for coming. So excited that you're here. I will say I was trying to read these. This is the only, well, I finished it today, so it doesn't even count, but this was like the only book that I was reading in March. I mean, I could not focus on anything else. And I don't think it was the book's fault. I think I was just preoccupied. This March was insane. And April's already starting to be a real kicker. But I was trying to read this at the same time because I found this book fascinating. It's Until Proven Safe. It's a history and future of quarantines. And this is definitely not dry. Really, really fascinating. I bought it strictly because the plague doctor was on it. And I was into it. It's written by two different people. And if I remember correctly, they started writing it in like 2016. And then COVID happened. And then they finished it. So they had a really interesting perspective of quarantine, not only in certain places like during the Black Plague, because that was briefly mentioned toward the end of the book, but they also had the COVID-19 quarantine to take into account as well. So highly recommend that if you're curious on continuing your plague readings. Who else wants to chat? I'm going to grab my screaming child. Yes, Joanna.
Okay, I tend to monopolize conversation, sorry. But I thought it was, okay, I tried to type this in a chat and I don't think it went through. So if I'm repeating myself, I apologize. But I thought it was fascinating about the weather and the famines having messed up everything for so many years before then that everybody's health was dodgy in the first place because they were all starving. And
We knew that.
the crops were a mess. And I found that really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I never knew. It was like I mean, it was honestly fixing to be like the perfect concoction for a plague. Like the earthquakes, the shitty weather,
Yeah,
rats. I mean, earthquakes like causing, oh my God, okay. The earthquakes causing all the rats to like come up from underground. Never knew.
yeah.
Fascinating.
I didn't know
Absolutely
that.
fascinating.
And the whole thing about the Russian marmots. That was fascinating.
Yeah, this would be distracting. Okay. Just gonna have a tail in my face. Rachel,
There we go. Sorry, I've been.
I love your bangs, by the way. Those are
Oh, thank you. It goes all up into here.
oh,
So I started this having recently re-listened to last podcast on the left's 5-part Black Plague series. So I was going into this already kind of knowing this, what I assumed was going to be like the structure of the book. And it was pretty spot on to like what I was expecting. So I was already going into this kind of being able to treat it like TV in the background. Like there wasn't a ton of like brand new information that I wasn't familiar with to some degree, but I really liked that about it. I read a little bit of the actual physical book, but then I started just doing knitting. I was like, I'm never going to finish this. I need to get the audiobook if I want to like actually consume this.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was really interesting. I think having somebody else read it really helped the pacing because it just doesn't sound right. I don't know if the author is British, but it doesn't sound right the way that I read things in my brain versus having somebody with a British accent reading it. It just works better.
Yeah.
And like, I really loved the contextualization of everything. Like y'all said, the bad weather, just kind of really painting a picture of what it was like and how awful it was to live in that time. And yeah,
Right.
it was super, super interesting. Not surprised that everything just goes back to anti-Semitism, because why wouldn't it? The less sense it makes, the more that's obviously the only answer. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I only have like an hour left of the audiobook, but like I know how it wraps up.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, without having been familiar with the flow of it and kind of what to expect, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much as I did. 100%, I could not sit there not doing anything else and reading it. It would just knock me out. But just having that going while I'm knitting something, it was the perfect amount of droning
Right.
where my brain could completely shut off and I can just absorb information like a sponge. But yeah, like if I didn't have something actively distracting me,
Mhm.
it's a lot. It's dense.
It is dense. Yeah. And I feel like I'm being really hard on it sometimes when I talk about it, because I don't want to say I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy it. But yes, it is very dense. I did like some of the, going back to what Stacey and Ralph were saying, I really did like the technical aspects of it. And I really liked when they got into the nitty-gritty of everything, and we were getting statistics and we were getting more information. But yeah, some parts, I mean, I was like, falling asleep.
It would have been nice to have like, I don't like necessarily know like a map, but like a converging timeline, like just laid out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it has so much lore isn't the right word, because obviously it's real, but
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
like if we're gonna compare it to like Tolkien, I love having that map just to
Yeah.
refer back to, because it's really hard to just stay in the correct timeline, especially because it kind of darted around.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily chronological, which really like messed me up until I was realizing like, oh, it isn't chronological the way he's explaining it. That doesn't make sense, but now I'm a lot less confused, because I kept just thinking like, am I just remembering the wrong years?
Yeah.
Like, weren't we like just like 5 years ahead of this? Yeah, we were.
Yeah, and I do think that again ties back into just the complete unknown of when this happened, where did it came from. And yes, somebody in the chat said the map at the beginning. Ashley, yeah, the map at the beginning of the book is quite funny. I should have known going into this that this probably wouldn't have given me all the answers, but just like all the possibilities of how this thing could have traveled.
Yeah, that
I mean-
wasn't demystifying anything.
I think
I
it's
need like a
evident.
year by year, just like a chronological
Yes.
timeline.
I needed that for sure. I think that we actually said that. Was it? Why are you crying? Stop it. I
They
think we
just
said
have to
that.
scream.
He's just talks. I don't know what who are you talking to? I think it was a couple books ago we mentioned that too. It's just I need like some sort of like timeline or something. Give me some sort of like, come on, crybaby. Come on. I need some sort of like chronological order or some type of thing. But yeah, the map at the beginning was almost comical. But I think it makes the most sense for it to have come over from trade ships, like, you know,
Oh, yeah.
guys coming over already being sick. Yeah, and I love some of the people too. Speaking of like the gore in this book, I think some people were talking in our on the book club's website about how I can stomach a lot of things, but some of the stuff in this book was a little bit too gruesome. And I think I showered more in March than I have any other month of my life. Can I help you? What's going on? Do you want to hang out? Okay, come on. We adopted this kitten recently, and I love him very much. But boy, is he a 10-month-old kitten.
I also have a 10-month-old kitten. I completely understand.
I love him so much. He attacked Chris's butt this morning. It was actually pretty funny while we were sleeping. That was hilarious. Okay, thank you so much. Anything else? Good, cool. And I'm gonna hit you up later for some hairstyling tips. Bird. Hello. Somebody was trying to get your attention earlier. They were flashing the lights on you in there. You are muted. I'm gonna click this really quick to give you a flash. I'm trying to get you. There you go. Hi.
Yes. Hi. So I pretty much agree with most of what everyone has said up to this point, that I think it was probably a little bit dry in some places. He definitely took 100 words to say what he probably could have said with 10 words a lot of the times, but I actually really enjoyed this book. I don't know if it's because this is like the first book I'm reading in this book club and I was just excited, but I
Welcome.
I really, really loved it. I liked the science that he did pull into the narrative. I think there was probably a little bit more in the beginning than later when they started breaking it down by the city, what each city's death count was, and yada yada yada. Like that definitely got repetitive. But like at one point they were talking about tree rings and how they were able to track the different ecological disasters, and how, like what Joanna was saying, certain things had to happen a very certain way for this to have accumulated. And I think that part is really cool because that's what we've seen in our modern day experiences with sickness or with disease. And I also really loved the times where he would mention a specific historical figure like Lady Joanna or Prince Pedro, and then he would drop like a little sentence or two here, and then a few chapters later he would bring them back up. And I can totally see how that would drive some people crazy, this non-linear way of telling this story. I really liked it though. It kept it interesting because it was like he was divvying up parts of the science side and then parts of the history side and then speculation, and then he'd go back to the science, and that kind of kept it a little bit interesting for me. I do really love certain parts more than others. I would probably rate it like a 3.5 to a 4-star out of 5 stars. But I do know that a lot of people have read plague books in this book club. I'm not really one of them. I just know general history, I guess. So I feel like I definitely learned a lot.
Good.
I do want to say that I liked the way he wrapped it up with, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but he does talk about like modern day opinions on the plague deniers versus, I forget what he called people who, believe the actual regular history of the plague. But I thought that was really interesting as well. And it kind of took me back to the beginning when he was talking about I guess the more technical stuff where there was like 3 stages of human plague, and the different types of fleas and the different types of rodents. And I kept reading this book thinking, man, I wish I had learned this in history class, but obviously
Right.
to go that in depth. So I kind of really liked it. As far as the details, it definitely is a more intimate history. But I 100% agree with people who said that, he does run on quite a bit. And he did get a little monotonous. I think it would have been cool to go a little bit more into the sociology part of the Black Death. Like, he did sort of start talking about like the Mongolian Pony Express and like the developments of the time. I thought that was really cool. And a little bit more of like Venice. That chapter was my favorite. Talking about the good things that people actually tried to do to combat it.
Yes.
That was fascinating to me. I did not know that at all. I didn't know that, there were some people during that time that, I don't want to call it common sense, but they had the wherewithal to try to do what they could, other than saying, oh, well, this is just God punishing us. And I wish we could have heard more stories like that, because that was really interesting to me. It was different, and it's a little bit different than what the common knowledge is, I think, that people have of the Black Plague. But yeah, that was my favorite portion of the book, and I really enjoyed it.
2 things on that. Yes. I agree. I think, yeah. I've already forgotten one of them. One of them was about God. What the hell was the other one? Oh, somebody commented on TikTok. She makes it sound like it's several books in one. And you know what? It kind of is. Like, it's kind of like a bunch of things happening at once. I totally understand why we needed all this kind of background information, and we needed to hear this. But again, some parts could have been just trimmed up a little bit. Nothing irritated me more. Well, the anti-Semitism was number 1. Number 2, the fact that they were blaming women. They were blaming the behavior of women. I mean, again, a tale as old as time. But saying like, this is God punishing us, like, made my eyes roll so far in the back of my head. They did a lap. Like, I could not believe some of the shenanigans in this book about that stuff. I know I tabbed it. It's going to take me a while to find specific comments, because I wrote WTF in this book probably 85 times. I wrote I hate people really large in the top here. But yeah, hearing too just how, did I put this? I think I put this in the Discord, where it was literally talking about how Christians didn't bathe because they were worried about the temptations of being in warm water.
Yes. Like that. And then they would discourage other people from bathing too. And it's like, for one of the biggest disasters in history, it was perpetuated by either men or religion or religious men. And it's just like, history does repeat itself. And it was kind of disappointing, but also kind of reassuring, like, oh, I'm not going crazy. This has happened before.
Some of the just like stuff that they would blame it on, and then they would like make themselves bleed to hopefully like get the infection out. And we were talking about it in the chat.
Yeah, bloodletting was super common back in the day.
Bloodletting. Thank you.
People loved bloodletting. They were like, you got blood? It's bad. Give me your blood.
And there was something about letting the blood out until you felt like you were going to faint, and then you would stop, or something like that. I'm like, we've come a long way. I love it, because I mean, despite having a ton of tattoos, I hate giving blood. I already feel I'm gonna faint just walking into the place. So that was fascinating. And yes, the urine, how they were able to like detect a person's like health, I guess, just based on like the color and the smell and the texture of their urine, which obviously we don't do it that intimately today, but that was super fascinating.
That is fascinating too, because I know that in ancient Egypt they would use that kind of study of urine to tell if people were pregnant or if they were carrying a certain disease. And so that was another thing that was like really interesting to me in that part of the world. I don't recall them talking about that part of the world being affected by the plague, but it's interesting to see the overlap of some of these things in different cultures that I had no idea.
Something else I found really interesting, which was fascinating because when COVID happened, one of the, and I know some people had their hands raised. I'm sorry if you, I think I saw like an Annabelle and a Teddy. If you guys wanted to also chat, go ahead and raise your hand again. But one thing that was super fascinating when COVID happened, there was a lot of blame on astrologers. People were like, why didn't anybody see this coming? Why didn't anybody like tell us that the, you know, the Mercury was going to be in, you know, Gatorade or whatever the heck it is. And like, why didn't anybody tell us that like this was going to be, this planet was going to be in line with this planet? So it's really interesting when we got to like, what was this, page 169, where it says in 1345, at 1 hour afternoon on 20th of March, when there was a major conjunction of 3 planets in Aquarius. In the master's view, the conjunction caused a deadly corruption in the air. I mean, we're on all sides of the spectrum with this book. Super fascinating. I was gonna say something else, but I can't remember. I gotta start like taking notes while I'm sitting here. Annabelle, did you have anything else, Bird? Was that all?
That was everything. And I'm really enjoying what everyone else has to say too.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited to see some newbies. Annabelle, you are muted, but yes, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. It's great to be joining you guys. Also, I apologize in advance if my dogs join the call. So I think that there were kind of echoing a lot of the times it did kind of go around in circles, but I think my favorite part of the book actually was at the end. So sorry, spoilers if you haven't finished it, when they talked about like what the changes to life in Europe during the medieval ages was like as a result of the plague, talking about how the mass die-off of people actually led to a better quality of life overall, because they like basically did not have enough food and were tilling the fields to the point where like you weren't getting returns, and how the change in demand for labor actually allowed the peasant class some kind of the ability to like wear silver and stuff like that. I thought that was all so fascinating, how like there how much of a positive change happened from such a horrible situation. Also, I thought the fact that some places it was a 60% death rate was absolutely bananas.
Yeah. And like every time they put, I think actually I wrote this down in the beginning because I think they said the highest number that I remember seeing, there was York. York was 32%, which was lower than average. And that's like what they suspected. But then Bremen, I think it was around Germany, around the German chapter. I could be wrong on that. 70%, which, I mean, like some of the places that I think I remember it was talking about Oxford, where they were saying, you know, this amount of people died. And then like historians would look back and be like, well, that's not, that couldn't have been possible because there weren't that many people even, you know, they just, there was a lot of contradictions with some of their numbers and how they were keeping track of all this. But again, that's incredibly hard to do. And I actually I found a quote later on, it might have been one of the last things I tabbed about that. And I thought it was a really haunting quote about, let me find it. If you had anything, I kind of cut you off, Annabelle, if you wanted to keep chatting while
that was really it. Just like the death rate was crazy, but then also just hearing about all of the positive changes that came after the plague settled.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think they learned a lot. I think they learned quite a few, starting with sanitation. Let's see, where was it? I have it like rewritten here at the top. This is again going back to his prose, which I think was at parts one of his strongest aspects of this. I really like the way he phrased a lot. And he said, I have to kind of paraphrase here, but 1 out of every 3 faces would vanish by year's end. stuff like that. Like he had a really fascinating way of telling some of the story that I really appreciated. So there was that one, and yeah, there's just so many tabs. There's a lot happening here. But yeah, speaking of that too, one of the most fascinating things to me about this was how they handled death. I mean, they had, which we saw too, even in COVID, we have mass amount of bodies. What do we do with them? And I actually shared a picture of that. I don't know if you guys follow me on Instagram, no pressure if you don't, but we do have an Instagram. I did share this picture, which was actually found fairly recently. I mean, in the past, like couple decades at least, of the plague pits, where, I mean, they were just having to dig holes and throw people in, and they weren't having proper burials, which was always, something absolutely devastating, especially for Christians who needed, like, the father to bless them, or however that works. So this picture really stood out to me. I mean, it's just, you find a new person, you count a different number every time you look at this. So and then I shared, there's a couple other really fascinating paintings from this time period too. I try and do this for every book that we're reading. I'll try and like find some pictures online and post something from the book. And somebody posted this on our Discord. I don't know if you're in here, I apologize, I can't remember who exactly posted this, but I thought this was such a fascinating graph of a history of pandemics and how much damage they did. Let's see. And here we are with the Black Death, the biggest one, the biggest pom-pom here is the Black Death. And of course we still have like COVID-19 in progress and ongoing down here. So really fascinating image. Becky. Hi, Becky. What's up, girl?
Hi. You'll all be happy to know I'm kid-free. So there won't be any interruptions.
We're not
tonight.
yelling at any children tonight. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Something that bringing up the pits made me think of this quote that I read it on my Kindle. And it says, "The dead were laid out layer upon layer, just like one puts layers of cheese on lasagna."
Oh yeah. Somebody put that on our book club.
And
site
I was
we're like, oh well, now
God.
you've ruined lasagna for me.
Yeah, some of the visuals with this book were the other one. I'm not finished with it. I'm on like chapter 8 or something. Something about going back to like the urine and stuff, and like people noticing that people who had a quote unquote dirty job maybe weren't as impacted by the plague. And so like this image of people going to the latrines to like sniff the noxious air. It's just like, oh my word. So I also, it was a little jarring when I first started the book because I didn't realize it had come out in 2006.
Yeah.
And so some of the way he was phrasing things, I was like, this is kind of weird. And then I had to go and look, oh, this is like a pre-COVID book. And it just kind of like goes to show you how like all of our brains are altered from like living through that.
Big time.
And so I thought that was, so I've had a little bit of a hard time with this book. I'll like read it and get into it and then be like, oh, okay, this is like really interesting and great. And then I'll kind of put it down and then like find myself not wanting to pick it back up again. So I'm not sure why that is, if it's the writing, if it's the structure, if it's like because of COVID, like I'm not sure. I've kind of similar to like, that I like Grey's Anatomy, but like the season that was like all COVID was like hard to consume, right? So I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but I am enjoying what I'm reading and like the little scientific tidbits and the history tidbits. I also was very disturbed or had no clue. I mean, it was like surprising, I guess, but unsurprising. Like, oh, okay, they were blaming the Jews for everything from like time immemorial. Like, if this is like, just we're like, we never stop with that. Like, what is that? It's infuriating. But one of the things that I think might have been intentional with the way that he sort of structures the book and goes back and forth and everything is sort of almost kind of following the path of a plague, and it's not linear. And it doesn't make sense. And when you're living through it, we're learning about it at the same time that we're like this sort of happened in COVID too, like, oh, sanitize all your groceries. Oh, never mind. We don't have to do, like, when you're learning as you go, right? Things, it's just sort of all over the place and it doesn't follow this nice, beautiful path.
Right.
And especially with the, this, we don't have all the information. We're trying to piece together what happened from, chroniclers and stuff like that. So I'm gonna finish and carry on because I am, learning a lot, and I do find it really interesting. It's almost kind of mind-boggling to me that we have writing from people this old. Like, that sounds so silly, I guess, but it's like, I don't know if other people do this, but like, I try to imagine, it's hard to wrap your mind around that long ago. Do you know what I mean? And like trying to imagine
people like just
people.
doing things. Yeah.
And it's really crazy. And just how scary it must have, I mean, things are scary now and we have quote unquote modern medicine, how scary this must have been. And like, now we can look back and think like, oh my God, like how dumb, right? Or whatever, God's punishment, whatever. Right. But like, what other like context did they have? I'm not excusing it.
No,
but
but
you know what I mean? Like, it's just so, yeah, like to think back to a time when we didn't know what germs were.
Clearly.
What? Like, what?
I mean, so, tossing their shit out the window like it was no biggie.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh God. I would not have made it.
I feel like it would have
be a germaphobe at this time. So anyway, I haven't finished, but I am enjoying it, and I'm making little highlights now and again. I was gonna see if there was another like little quote that I found this interesting. This was just in the page or the chapter I just finished. It says, in plague, fear acts like a solvent on human relationships. It makes everyone an enemy and everyone an isolate. In plague, every man becomes an island, a small haunted island of suspicion, fear, and despair. And I was just like, wow. Yep. I mean, it's just kind of almost gives you a little shiver reading that, now that we were kind of living through, maybe not, I don't know if it's early on in the book, he said something like a similar event to this would be like almost 2 billion people dying. And I forget what we're at for COVID, like probably 7 million or something. So, I mean, a lot.
COVID is at 6.6 according to this chart.
Yeah. So anyway.
I love the comment from Annabelle in our chat.
Yeah.
She says, I've changed my mind. Illustrations aren't enough. This book needs to be a scratch and sniff.
Annabelle, no.
This is why you're not, by the way, if you come to the Morbidly Curious Book Club, don't bring dinner. Just eat afterwards or tomorrow. I don't know. I remember we were like discussing something recently and it was Becky eating. And then she like, somebody said something about like a dead body and I could see her pause like with the
yeah.
It was like halfway in her mouth, like,
yeah.
Okay.
But illustrations in this book would have been cool. Yes. I think that could have really added to it. And I definitely agree about like a timeline or some like something to give context around, okay, where am I now?
Yeah.
In this story would have been helpful. I think that's part of why I was struggling with it at times, is because where am I? Who is he talking about now? And to get back to kind of try to put myself back into the story was difficult at times. So
I 100% agree. 100% agree. There's a lot of really good one-liners in here. But also I feel like I could be wrong about this, but I just feel like since this was written in 2006, maybe there just wasn't so much of a need for those kind of illustrations and stuff. Like maybe they just, I don't know. Like I feel like if this book was written recently, there would be, but I could be wrong about that. I don't know. It just feels like something a part of the sub book that would come out in 2006. But I also would really love kind of John Kelly's input, Great Mortality too, given
That's what I was just gonna
COVID.
say. It'd be kind
Yeah.
of fascinating to hear his thoughts now, or and maybe he's written, I need to go and see. Maybe he has chimed in, but
Yeah. I didn't.
Yeah.
I need to look that up actually. I need to look that up. Cool. Yeah, what else was I gonna say? There's something Becky said that had me wanting to discuss. I hope that was a cat. Some of the noises this house makes, man. I don't remember what else I was going to say. Oh, it's two cats fighting outside. They'll be fine.
okay.
They'll be fine. I don't know when Chris is coming home. So if somebody does come home, that's gonna freak me out. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here's that Hiroshima and Nagasaki comment that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta start. You know what? I'm gonna start bringing like a pad and paper and just start writing things down. Let's see. Anyway, anybody else want to give their 2 cents? Oh, hello, Amber.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't tell if I was unmuted or not because I'm using it on my phone. And oh, there he goes. I was going to say me and Winston had opinions, but apparently he doesn't want to be included. There he goes. Apparently he only wanted to be here in silence.
Hey,
And then once I started speaking, it's like, no. As I defer myself. There we go.
This looks black on camera, but I'm covered.
Oh yeah, I was like, that's what I'm saying. At least I'm wearing a black shirt with a black hat.
There you go.
But I was just saying, I kind of as much as I know the book was about the plague, I enjoyed all of the drama that the author also talked about. I'm like, man, I didn't know that medieval times had that much drama. It reminded me, I'm like, are we on Jersey Shore?
I think
the
I drew
real
a teacup.
world?
That reminds me.
Something?
I drew a teacup at one point because I was like, oh, we are getting
The tea.
so much tea right now.
Right? I was just saying, the one page I put in the chat, I was like, he was found dead with a plumber's hot iron in his anus. And I was like, excuse me?
In his anus. I'm like, wow, we're really just spreading people's business, John, aren't we?
Right. And I remember I was in the doctor's office waiting for my doctor to come in when I read that part. So she came in and she's like, oh, what book are you reading? And I was showing it to her. She's just like, and I'm like, I just have to read this to you because I need to tell it to somebody because I just read it.
While I have you here.
And I read it the little blurb to her and she just starts dying with laughter because she's only slightly older than I am. I think she's late 30s or early 40s. So she just starts dying with laughter over it. She's like, that was not what I was expecting you to read me in a book about the plague.
Right. Right.
Because-
also, Becky, I also had here on page 110, I just put hashtag lasagna with a heart.
And then
Keep going. I cut you off. Keep going.
And then the other thing that I thought was really interesting was I had no idea about the anti-Semitism and the actual massacre of the Jewish people that occurred because of the plague. And
that's a good word.
which for me is absolutely wild because everybody would be like, oh, the Holocaust is this rare thing. And it's well, no, it happened a few hundred years ago too. I don't think anybody, as many people know that. And then also it drew a lot of parallels for me with a lot of the stereotypes and like mindsets that we drew with COVID and Asian people and
Yes.
Chinese people, but then also a lot of the from just my reading, like it's like the stereotypes that the right uses a lot too now, where like it was like a lot of like the stuff about them being like these bankers and well connected to trade and being wealthy and everything. I'm like, oh, so this is where this all originated. Technically, if like you tie it also to modern days, like a lot of like these right wing conspiracy theories that you see, like that's where that all first started, is way back during the plague.
Mm-hmm. And here
And
we
like
are.
way back
Nothing
then,
has
like
changed.
that was insane to me, just because like that's like I've been reading a lot on that subject, just because you know the current state of things, and just happen to know a lot from activism. And I was like, wow, like I had no idea that that's when, like that was like, I don't know if that was like when they started or like if it kept going, but like that's when like one of the seeds of like these stereotypes that we have today first started back then. Like, and it was like wild me, because like sometimes you never see like the starting point for some of these stereotypes, and you're like, oh, like how did they get their start? Where
Right.
did it come from? And you're just like, and then you're reading this book and you're just like, oh, well, there it is. There it is. All right. And like, just like, I think like reading, like, cause I was like, that's the chapter I'm on right now. And like, they're like, yeah, like, you know, like they killed like, you know, 1.2 million Jews. And I was like, oh, okay, y'all really
Relentless.
thought that like and like the conspiracy behind it, where they're like, yeah, they're poisoning the air
Right.
with their
Probably got
spells.
everybody on board, like barely even trying. They were like, he did it. And everybody was like, okay.
Yeah, and like they like, and then like they were like, yeah, they even had like specific names, like Jacob the Rabbi, that didn't even exist. And I'm just like, y'all. And then like watching like some, like you'd have like I forgot the guy's name. His name started with a B, like Bill Zanini or something.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
like they talk about like how they took him to like that one village, and he just kind of gave in and was like, yeah, no, that's where I poisoned them. Yeah, no, that's where so and so. Yeah. And then they ended up killing him 3 weeks later, just because he was like, yeah, whatever. Like he just kind of like, they're saying like, they said they don't know if he like, they're saying if he lost his mind or if like he just realized that that's kind of what he had to do. Like they weren't going to believe him either way. And that was insane to me.
They were
And
putting
it's
out
like,
like papers, weren't they? Saying like it was almost like I don't want to call it like a newspaper almost, but they were putting out these
yeah,
telegrams, I guess, or however you wanted to call them, just blaming everybody and saying,
yeah.
you
I'm
know,
like,
oh, it's the
then I guess
government.
they're
It's
saying that like they tortured the Jewish people to get their
tortured.
confessions out of them. And then for me, it was another thing, like I can connect to like recent reading I did, because I just read a book about the Syrian civil war, which ironically I was hyper fixated on that before the earthquake happened. So I had a lot to say about when the earthquake occurred. But like same thing as like a lot of like the torture methods that they mentioned using from like the Assad regime soldiers were using on rebels and protesters was very similar to some of the things they were talking about that they were doing to Jewish people back during plague times. And so it's like my ADHD brain's at that meme with like Charlie from It's Always Sunny going, all the strings
connecting
everywhere.
everything. I wanted to mention something too while it was fresh, because I know Becky mentioned this as well. We were just talking, and I feel like I was giving the people who wrote about the plague a hard time earlier, because like there's not enough documentation, and it's like we barely know what paper is, you know. So I take that back a little bit. I'm glad we did get what we got, I guess, from people writing about it. But there was something really eerie happening right at the end of chapter 9, where it says at the bottom here, One historian puts the death rate among the Anglo-Irish at 35 to 45%. The native Irish probably suffered less. Here we go again. Though how much less is unclear. Whatever their death rate, there was more than enough suffering to go around in Ireland in 1348 and 1349. The final sentence in the manuscript of John Klyn, the Irish monk who originally wrote, quote, waiting among the dead for death to come, end quote, was written by another monk. He finished the book for him, and it says, and here it seems the author died. Goosebumps everywhere. That is so eerie. So stuff like that. I wanted to mention that while I was remembering it. And then that's where I also was saying, you know, like the author here is kind of putting why Pestis in like this antagonist, which it is, position where they're like, you know, going from city to city and seeing all these and visiting and like, you know, making appearances. Anyway, let's see, Amber, and then Kelsey also had their hand raised.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just like to finish off, is like also sitting there thinking about like, it was interesting for like a lot of the chroniclers, like how just straightforward they were, and a lot of like their descriptions of things. Like you wouldn't think that back then they'd be like, yeah, like, you know, I'm just sitting here among the dead waiting for death. You're like you're used to, like, you think, like, we're kind of used to, I guess, like almost like those like illuminated manuscripts with the flowery language and like the thous and thus and thys and however else you like all those words, and like this, and meanwhile like these chroniclers are like the complete opposite, like with the just very straightforward. And I think the other one that was like things were bonkers to me, like they were talking about like how these like some of these villages were just like completely wiped out, like to like nobody, like because like for me it's like always being like very interested about like, you know, abandoned places and how places become abandoned. It's like
I'm fascinated
like
by
just
that.
to think like, you know, like these like, because like what was it, where is it, oh I think it's Poveglia Island in Italy.
Yeah.
I think that's where like they sent, it was either like they put a lot of plague bodies or put a lot of people who had plague in like quarantine and just kind of left them there, and then, you know, then they became plague bodies.
Right.
I
know about
like,
the island because of Ghost Adventures.
Yeah. Oh, Zachary Bagel Bites.
Zachary Big. We've talked about him a lot on the Discord.
Although that is one of like their good episodes, though.
It is a great episode, and you know what? I would go. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if that's probably mentioned in this other book that I was talking about here, because there's a huge difference too between isolation and quarantine, which is really fascinating. Which is more so discussed in this book than this book. Anyway, Kelsey has had her hand raised. Let's go ahead and get to Kelsey.
I was just gonna have one more thing.
Let's have it.
Okay. For me, it was like I was just gonna say that was quick. It was like because I've been to Italy when I was in college, and they actually mentioned the village I went to. They meant like the Orvieto. They mentioned Orvieto in there, and all of a sudden I was like, I've been there. I've spent a weekend there, like, and it was one of those things where I'm looking, I'm like, they're talking about like how the village got like absolutely like decimated, and I was like, for me having been, I'm like, that tracks, because of like I remember how close all of like the little like places are, because it's like one of those mountain villages. So it's like the cobblestone streets, like the like built into like not like the mountains, but it's like the way they built it's like almost like those like clay terracotta building structure type of thing.
Yeah, right.
And so like I remember how like narrow the streets were, with how tall like everything was, and how close like each like residence was, with windows and doors and everything. So like reading that and remembering like when I was there, I'm like, that kind of tracks, remembering how like small everything was compared to like, you know, what we might be used to when you think of like a small village. Like some of these streets were like maybe like a person and a half like width wise from like one side to the other that you're going down. Literally one of the most beautiful villages I've ever been to.
Sure. Plague
but
aside.
Like also like, but reading that, it was wild to have like in like this other mindset of like, you never like, when I was there, you didn't stop to think the plague visited this village. and then they read about it, I'm like, oh damn, that's wild. Like for me to like, yeah, just say like to be able to like literally have been there and then read about what happened to this place I have been.
Right.
Like absolutely decimated by the plague, and then be there like, wow, that's like, first off, I didn't think the village was that old. And also just like being able to like think back now, it's like, oh damn. Like you don't like, it's like to put the two of them together, it's wild to think that like, did the apartment we stayed in, did that have people that died, or did they survive? Like, did they lose the whole family? Did they only lose a couple people? Did people like, is this like land that had death on it? Was it a land that didn't have death?
I think you would really like this then. Yeah, you would probably really like this. I'll put it in the Discord again because I know you're in the Discord, so I'll put it in there. Speaking of Discord, I also put our Discord link in the chat if you would like to join that.
And now I am done.
Thank you. Kelsey, hi.
Hi, new. Gonna try to not talk super fast because my brain is irrational and we love that for us.
Welcome. We're so happy you're here.
But so then two thoughts is, and it was a vehicle for anti-Semitism, which like everyone, I'm like, oh my God, it's that. Okay, beautiful. We just blame the Jews for everything. I love that for all of time.
Hate it.
And it was used more as a vehicle for the anti-Semitism, but in that same vein, I was like amazed and was like, what? That we're doing conspiracy theories in 1300. That there was this big conspiracy amongst all these people. It's like, well, they're poisoning the water and this and that. And I'm like, oh God, this is cool. This has been a problem in life forever. We love it. And now we have the internet. So thank God, I guess, for that.
Yeah, they could have really done some damage with that. I always had a theory too on that note. What cult leader that we heard about in like, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond, which one would have done the most damage if they had had social media?
Ooh.
Something to think about. Shit like that keeps me up at night. Keep going, Kelsey.
There I go.
Let me out of my misery.
And then I found one, many parts stuck out, but one that I actually was able to find in my not at all organized tab system is that by trade, by day, I'm a mental health therapist. So really post-COVID, it was just for myself and also like treating clients and like things post-pandemic. We're still in the pandemic, post-worst of the pandemic, I will say.
Right.
It is right at the beginning of chapter 12, end of 276, beginning of 277. I can't find his name, but it's a moralist. And it was thought, he wrote, after the pestilence, that people whom God, by his grace and life, had preserved would become better, humble, virtuous, Catholic, avoid inadequacies, inequities, and sins, and overflowing with love and charity for one another. But the opposite happened. Men gave themselves over to the most disordered and sordid behavior. They wallowed in idleness. Their dissolution led them into sin of gluttony, into banquets, taverns, delicate food, and gambling. They rushed headlong into lust. Which I read and thought, yeah, these people just survived in their lifetime, granted. If you lived through all the horrible natural disasters preceding it, but obviously, like, people are going to, like, I don't know if relishing was, I think it's more like maladaptive coping, but
right.
Like, yes, people are going to like throw themselves into like all of these earthly pleasures because you just watched a third of the population eat it in, what was it, over the course of 8 years, 9 years?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I mean, not just
like, oof.
Not just like die, but I mean, like, die
died in the streets,
collapsing next to you. You're walking over bodies. I think there was a part too where they were like, babies were still like suckling on their dead mothers. I mean, just like the worst visual thing that could probably ever. I mean, yes, every plague, every sickness, every something like this, COVID, everything like that has been absolutely terrible. But how graphic the Black Death was, I mean, just, and to like the sores that they would get, I mean, oh my God. So yeah, go gamble, damn it. Like,
go get drunk and have sex and gamble. Come on.
I think, what was it, alleyway sex that I mentioned earlier? Go get it. don't get sick, but like you just like survived the worst thing to ever happen to humanity. Go and be fruitful. You know what I mean? Like yeah, absolutely. I love that you pointed that out. I feel like by the end of this book, I was really like trying to get through it. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I've marked it. Yeah. Yeah, some parts of this I really, really loved. And then some parts I was like falling asleep, and I hate doing that because I love history. I love learning about this stuff, especially since we are also coming down from, I mean, it's still happening, COVID, but like, yeah, this pandemic, where, we're still getting used to so much. I mean, we're still trying to figure out, like, I have to go to the movies on Monday. I'm petrified. I haven't been to the movies since 2019. Like, just weird shit like that. And it's such a third world problem or a first world problem, but it's like, there's like this weird, like, getting back into the groove of just like living that's so bizarre that I feel like we're still trying to figure out. And who knows how long COVID will be around. I'm sure they have like predictions and numbers, but yeah, it's just that's super fascinating to me as well. So I do hate to say that this was dry because I do like a good dry history book, but like, yeah, some parts of this were just really a struggle. Anyway, I'm rambling. Anybody else? We've been chatting for like an hour and a half. I love it. And thank you for everybody who's new. I'm so grateful. Hi, Christina. Hopefully I said your name right. Oh my God. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep these on.
It's the last name that's the hard one.
Let's see.
That's the look of every teacher in my entire life.
Is it just Path?
Path. You just have to pretend like the P isn't there.
I was pretending like the F wasn't there. Thank you for coming.
Like this was something like I really liked it, but I also have a background in microbiology, so this was actually less dry than a lot of the things I've read about.
Like, guys, this was so entertaining. I loved it.
But the thing that really stuck out to me, especially in the current, COVID environment, is when they were talking about the guy in that one Paris neighborhood whose entire job was to just count all of those death bequests, and how by 1349 he is barely keeping records. He has uncharacteristic sloppiness. He's not even bothering to write down names. He's just like, yeah, $300. Yeah, $400. Because they said it's the kind of indifference to the monotony of death. And I was just like, yes. Because I remember the beginning of 2020 when it was like, if I go outside, I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And then I work in senior living. And so 3 years down the line, I'm just like, Yep, there's more. And now we've got like this potential deadly fungus thing that's going into long-term care facilities. I'm like, great, bring it.
And that's like not being discussed enough, I feel.
Yeah.
I've seen that on the news like maybe once. It's like, okay, no cure for anything fungal. We've all been watching The Last of Us. Like, this is terrifying.
Well, that's because fungus, because I actually was just listening to a podcast that talked about funguses in general, and fungal, like the family of fungus, or the genus, or whatever the stupid thing is, has more in common with animals than plants. And so when you have a fungal infection, it's very hard to differentiate what is you and what is the fungus.
Okay.
Which makes them very hard to treat.
I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson too was it the Joe Rogan podcast? I think it was. I saw a TikTok of it and I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was talking about how he says it way more smart than I'm about to, but he was discussing how, for people who eat mushrooms as like a meat substitute, there is this flavor to it that is almost meaty, and there is like more in our ancestral DNA or something that ties us back to wherever we sprouted from. We have more in common with mushrooms and like fungi and anything than anything else.
Yeah.
which is wild. I find that absolutely fascinating. And then it's trying to kill us. So, yeah, I'm trying to keep my eye on that whole thing that's happening, but it's kind of hard because I feel like not a lot of people are talking about it, and it's worrisome because again, there's no vaccine for that. So
yeah, but that whole just being exhausted with what's happening to the point where you're just like, oh yes, that person just bled to death in front of me. Cool, must be
Totally
Tuesday.
desensitized. Just next patient. Like I couldn't even imagine. Could not even imagine. Anybody else before we get into our palate cleansers? Cool. So a couple things to wrap it up again. We have, where is it? We do have an Instagram if you would like to follow us. I post a picture at the beginning of every month, and then I post our reading guides as well. You don't have to follow the reading guides. They are just there to help if people need it. And then I will periodically, here's my plague doctor tattoo if I haven't showed it off already, but that is one of my favorites. Anyway, so I do post some pictures and some quotes from the book that I find interesting. If you guys would like to submit any quotes or anything you found interesting, please do. Just send me a DM and I would love to post a picture to a quote that you have found. We're all going to find something a little different, which I love. Also on the topic of reading guides, so I think there's more on the book club's website than there is on the app, but I could be wrong because they have made a lot of really incredible changes. But if you were going to go to the book club's website that we are all connected to, I would definitely prefer doing it on a computer if you are able to. If you go to our documents tab under miscellaneous here, I have listed, since I started doing it, all of our reading guides. And of course, here's the one for our book that we are reading in April this month. So yes, we are reading about one of the most awful people on the planet. I guess the worst couple on the planet, but I, for some reason, hate her more. The Doomsday Mother by John Glatt. This is Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell, and the End of an American Family. I'm like 97% sure that her trial starts tomorrow. I think I'm right on that. I don't think they have a date set for Chad's trial. So perfect time to be reading this. And then we voted on which book to read about this couple, Lori and Chad. Doomsday Mother ultimately won. This was the other book. From what I've gathered, the Doomsday Mother is more so a comprehensive timeline type of book about the case, while When the Moon Turns to Blood by Leah Sawtile is more of an in-depth, I don't know how exactly it was explained to me, but this one deals more with the religion aspect to it. And this one just deals more with the true crime aspect to it. Oh, thank you. Her trial does begin tomorrow. Great timing. I cannot wait to see this bitch go to jail for the rest of her life. So I'm going to be reading both of these for this month. It is not required. I don't even recommend it. It's going to be a lot. It's going to piss me off, but I would like to read both of these because I am very curious about how Chad Daybell was like becoming a cult leader essentially, and how she just fell right into his trap, and they were like the worst concoction of couple you could get. So if you would like to join me on that endeavor, you are more than welcome to, but as far as the discussion goes, it is not necessary at all. So Doomsday Mother for April. And then, as you guys can probably see, we plan a little bit ahead. May, which ironically, February, we read a book about the Dyatlov Pass, which was the 70th, I think, anniversary of when the Dyatlov Pass actually happened. What did we just read? Oh, well, the Black Death, we don't really know when exactly that happened, but this is happening in April. And then in May, we are reading about Chernobyl, which is kind of when this was unfolding. So May, we are reading Midnight in Chernobyl by Adam Higginbotham. This also there's a couple different books on Chernobyl. This is, of course, a book club pick. There's another book called Voices of Chernobyl, which I will also be reading. That has like over 100 something interviews with people who were there and experienced it and survived. So that is coming up very soon too. And then June, because I just feel like we haven't read enough about ghosts, we're going to check out Amy Bruni's book, Life with the Afterlife. 13 Truths I Learned About Ghosts. I love Amy Bruni. I think she's great. I have had this on my shelf for the longest time, so I'm very excited to be finally reading it. So that is what's coming up. I will be posting, Manual for Survival. Okay. I was like, are you showing me like a prepper book right now? And then an environmental history of the, okay, well shit, I'll buy that one too. Give me everything about Chernobyl. We just rewatched the show because we finished up The Last of Us, and I was like, okay, now that we've watched this, let's continue with this Craig Mazin train and let's watch Midnight in Chernobyl. So anyway, we got Lori Vallow up next, and then if you would like to join our Discord, the link is in our chat, but it is also on our book club site. If you need it, just send me a DM. I will make sure you get it. I try and condense it to only people in the book club. Don't let any outsiders in. We try and keep it contained over there. On the Discord, though, we do have certain channels and categories where we're actually trying to do some local meetups. So I have states listed, and you can chat with people in your area. You could talk to people who are nearby and maybe do a meetup at some point. I'm in North Carolina. I know we've been trying to get one going for a little while, so hopefully that will happen very soon. Lord of mercy, is there anything else? I think that's it. We are almost at 5,500 members of this book club, which is bananas. I cannot get over that. That's so freaking exciting. I cannot stress enough how excited I am that you guys are here. This is like such a dream come true. I remember coming up with the name of this, contemplating it for a couple days, finally making it, and I was just so giddy when there was 10 members. I'm like, oh my God, people actually want to read books with me. And it's getting out of control now. So I love you guys very much. We are going to start with the palette cleansers. I do see that Becky and Amber have their hand raised. So Becky, go ahead.
I'm old and I need to start going on Discord. So I don't really know how it works, but
it's kind of confusing. Even the veterans, I don't even think know how Discord works.
So I'll try to
I can help you out though. Send me a DM and I can talk you through it.
Okay. I thought at one point also you had mentioned and maybe I missed it, just even in the book club's app that there were like discussions for finding people in your area, and then I couldn't find that. So yeah. maybe that's easier on Discord than in the actual book clubs.
It's a good thing that happened what had happened was a video went viral, and some people in the comments of that video were talking about how like they were in Indiana or they were in this state, and people were like trying to meet up. So I posted this one big post on book clubs, like, comment what state you're in. It got out of control. There were like 500 comments, and I was like, you know what, we're just gonna start a Discord. So that's where we're at.
Okay, I will definitely put that on my list of things to figure out.
It's really good. It's fine, and we've been checking up on each other too. I know there's been a lot of tornadoes in the Midwest and in Texas today, so we make sure we check in on each other, and everybody's still in one piece. It's a great time. It would be nice.
I find myself, this might sound sappy, but
I love it.
I'm a big ball of mush. You guys will know that soon if you know me at all. And it'll be like during the month feeling like I wish I could talk to so-and-so. Right. Like, you know, it'd just be nice to connect besides just the monthly meeting, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So it's a perfect place to do that for sure.
Okay, cool. Palette cleanser wise, I just wanted to I kind of had a little bit of a reading slump this month, but I did continue my chronological Stephen King read. So I read The Shining.
Oh, yeah.
And oh my God, I just love it. I just love that book so much. And then I was trying to, I don't know who has all read The Shining, and then of course there's like the Stanley Kubrick movie, which I like in its own right, but it like barely follows the novel. So it's kind of like its own thing. And then Stephen King like notoriously hates the movie, but there was like a TV miniseries of The Shining that came out when I think I was in high school, and it had Rebecca De Mornay in it, and it had one of the brothers from Wings, the cuter one. somebody older, remind me, as Jack Torrance, and it was so good, and it like followed the novel a lot closer. So I like was trying to find that and like found some of it on YouTube or whatever. Anyways, so that was my reading score for the month was rereading The Shining, because I hadn't read it since high school, and it's still as good as it was when I read it then. Though I will say it's really interesting reading some of Stephen King's work as a grown-up than from when I was a teenager. So I've kind of really enjoyed this little embarkation that I'm on, because
good word. I like that word.
I think people, and I think we struggle with this in the true crime community in general, people tend to like glorify bad people or try to make them an anti-hero or whatever, and like, no, ew, they're just terrible. And like, there's just a big part of me who like Jack Torrance was not a good dad. He was weak. And so I think that it's just interesting watching like my thought process, how it's different from a teenager to now, of like who was like, oh, an anti-hero or whatever. And it's like, no, he was just a piece of shit. So TV wise, I need to watch The Last of Us. I haven't done that because I think you guys were saying like you don't have to care about the video game or anything to like enjoy
go
it.
in blind.
So
Yeah.
I'm planning to do that. So I did finish watching the latest season of You, and it was okay.
Well, if I had $1 for everybody who has in the past like couple months asked me if I've watched You, I would at least have $10 at this point. Like I feel like everybody has asked me if I've watched that show, and I just haven't yet because I wanted to read it first. But here we are.
Sure. I think this last season's the weakest season, which that kind of tends to happen in TV shows. But
I also heard that about The Mandalorian. I heard this past episode of The Mandalorian. Season of The Mandalorian wasn't that great.
Penn Badgley is like my current internet boyfriend, so that's like why a big reason I kept watching it. But anyways, those are my palate cleansers. I also did read one really good thriller by Lucinda Berry called When She Returned, and it was very good. And it's got like it's a cult book. But was very good. I've gotten very critical of thrillers over the years, but that was a good one.
Really quick before I forget too, Becky, you were talking about Kindle too. This is $1.99 right now on Kindle. If anybody wants to pick it up, The Doomsday Mother. Did anybody else?
Oh my God, are you serious? I just bought it the other day and it was $9.
Anyway, yeah.
Freaking Amazon.
Yeah, I'm trying to buy more off of Pango Books right now. I'm going to stop